All warfare is based on deception. Sun Tzu, they tell you honesty is the best policy. They tell you the truth will set you free. This is a lie whispered by the weak to disarm the strong. Honesty is a tool to be deployed with surgical precision, not a blanket rule for fools. The world is a theater of deception, and those who cling to naive notions of absolute truth become puppets dancing on strings they cannot see. Observe the politician promising change, his eyes betraying the emptiness of his words. Watch the salesman praising a product he knows is flawed, his smile a mask concealing his avarice. They thrive because you believe their carefully constructed facade. Your willingness to accept their performance as genuine is your greatest vulnerability. We do not traffic in comforting illusions. We dissect the art of deception, not to condemn it, but to understand it, to master it, and to wield it as a shield and a weapon. The architects of power understand this. They know that information is currency, and misinformation is a form of control. They manipulate narratives, distort facts, and craft elaborate deceptions to maintain their dominance. To navigate this treacherous landscape, you must abandon the childish fantasy of a world governed by honesty and embrace the cold, hard reality of strategic deception. Learn to recognize the subtle signs, the telltale gestures, the inconsistencies in their stories. Sharpen your perception, develop your intuition, and become a master of discernment. Only then can you hope to protect yourself from the machinations of others and navigate the complex web of power that surrounds you. This is not about becoming a villain, but about becoming sovereign. It is about reclaiming your agency in a world designed to deceive you. Deception, at its core, is an exercise in exploiting cognitive biases. Human beings are not rational machines. We are creatures of habit, emotion, and flawed perception. These inherent vulnerabilities are the chinks in our armor that deceivers exploit. Consider the availability heuristic. We tend to overestimate the likelihood of events that are easily recalled, often due to their vividness or recent occurrence. A skilled manipulator can leverage this bias by constantly highlighting specific threats or exaggerating certain advantages, thereby shaping perception and influencing decision-making. The con artist peddling fear of a non-existent danger to sell overpriced security systems understands this principle perfectly. He is not simply offering a product. He is planting a seed of anxiety, nurturing it with carefully crafted narratives, and harvesting the resulting profits. Furthermore, our brains are wired for pattern recognition. We seek coherence and predictability in the world around us, and we are uncomfortable with ambiguity. This drive for cognitive consistency makes us susceptible to the confirmation bias, the tendency to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs and disregard evidence that contradicts them. A demagogue, for instance, preys on this bias by reinforcing the prejudices and anxieties of his followers, creating an echo chamber where dissenting voices are silenced and his own narrative is amplified. He offers not truth, but validation, and his followers willingly embrace the illusion of certainty, even when it is built on a foundation of lies. This is the power of crafting a compelling narrative, a story that resonates with the deep-seated desires and fears of the target audience. The art of deception also hinges on understanding the psychology of trust. We are more likely to believe those we perceive as trustworthy, whether that trust is based on genuine rapport, shared identity, or simply a convincing performance. The deceiver cultivates an image of credibility, often by feigning sincerity, mirroring body language, and expressing empathy. This is the subtle dance of manipulation, the carefully calibrated performance designed to lower our defenses and gain our confidence. Think of the wolf in sheep's clothing, not as a crude metaphor, but as a precise description of the deceiver's strategy. He adopts the guise of harmlessness, using our own assumptions about appearance and behavior against us. Emotional manipulation is another powerful tool in the deceiver's arsenal. By appealing to our emotions, they can bypass our rational faculties and influence our behavior directly. Guilt, fear, and greed are all potent motivators, and a skilled manipulator knows how to trigger these emotions to achieve their desired outcome. A blackmailer, for example, weaponizes guilt and fear, exploiting past indiscretions to extort money or exert control. They are not simply making a threat. They are tapping into the deep-seated anxieties that drive human behavior, leveraging our own vulnerabilities against us. The effectiveness of deception also depends on the element of surprise. When we are caught off guard, our cognitive defenses are weakened, and we are more susceptible to manipulation. The bait-and-switch tactic, for example, relies on this principle, luring victims with a seemingly attractive offer, and then substituting it with something less desirable once they are committed. The initial offer serves as a distraction, diverting attention from the true intentions of the deceiver. This element of surprise disrupts our expectations and throws us off balance, making us more likely to accept the deception. Finally, the deceiver understands the power of repetition. By constantly repeating a lie, even if it is initially met with skepticism, they can gradually erode resistance and create a sense of familiarity. This is the principle behind propaganda, the systematic dissemination of biased or misleading information to shape public opinion. The repeated exposure to a particular narrative, even if it is demonstrably false, can eventually lead to its acceptance as truth. The human mind, in its quest for efficiency, often relies on heuristics and shortcuts, and repetition can exploit this tendency, creating a cognitive bias in favor of the repeated message. The world is not as it seems, and those who recognize these psychological levers gain a significant advantage. The capacity to discern truth from falsehood, to see through the masks of deception, is not merely a matter of intelligence. It is a skill that must be cultivated through constant vigilance and critical thinking. The corporate raider Carl Icahn exemplified deception by design. His strategy wasn't simply about acquiring undervalued assets. It was a carefully orchestrated performance designed to destabilize, manipulate, and ultimately extract maximum value, often at the expense of others. Consider his approach to Transamonia, a fertilizer trading company. Icahn didn't launch a hostile takeover immediately. Instead, he acquired a significant minority stake, enough to gain access to the company's financial information and wield influence, but not enough to trigger immediate alarm. This initial, seemingly benign investment served as a Trojan horse, allowing him to gather intelligence and assess the company's vulnerabilities without raising undue suspicion. His next move was to publicly criticize the company's management and strategy, painting a picture of inefficiency and mismanagement. These criticisms, whether entirely accurate or not, were deliberately amplified through media outlets, creating a climate of uncertainty and eroding investor confidence. The goal wasn't necessarily to improve the company's performance. It was to drive down its stock price, making it a more attractive target for a future takeover. The subtle art of public disparagement became a key weapon in his arsenal. He then began to engage in a series of calculated maneuvers, such as proposing alternative business plans and threatening proxy fights, further destabilizing the company and creating internal divisions. These actions were designed to exert pressure on the management team, forcing them to negotiate from a position of weakness. The pressure was relentless, a psychological assault aimed at breaking the will of the executives. Throughout this process, Icahn maintained a facade of rationality and concern for the company's shareholders, even as he was actively undermining its value. He presented himself as a champion of shareholder rights, arguing that his actions were ultimately in the best interests of the company and its investors. This carefully crafted image allowed him to garner support from other shareholders and deflect criticism from the media. The performance was crucial. He needed to appear as the rational actor, the one who saw the flaws and offered the solution, even if the solution primarily benefited him. The endgame was always clear: to acquire control of the company at a discounted price and then restructure it to maximize its profitability, often through layoffs, asset sales, or other measures that prioritized short-term gains over long-term sustainability. This ruthless approach to value extraction was a hallmark of his career, a testament to his understanding of power dynamics and his willingness to exploit them to his advantage. His success stemmed not only from his financial acumen, but also from his mastery of psychological manipulation, his ability to deceive, intimidate, and ultimately control the narrative. He weaponized information, deploying it strategically to create confusion, sow discord, and advance his own agenda. The case of Transimonia and countless others reveals a pattern, a deliberate strategy of deception designed to exploit vulnerabilities and extract value, regardless of the consequences for others. Icon's actions are a stark reminder of the dark side of capitalism, the ruthless pursuit of profit that can often come at the expense of ethics and integrity. The weak invariably fail because they underestimate the sophistication and patience of the trap. They see the initial offering, the seemingly generous proposition, without recognizing the carefully laid groundwork that makes their acceptance inevitable. The con artist doesn't present his scheme as a blatant swindle. He presents it as an opportunity, a chance for advancement, a solution to a pressing problem. He offers a lifeline, knowing full well that it's attached to a noose. The victim, blinded by hope or desperation, grasps at it without considering the long-term implications. He focuses on the immediate benefit, ignoring the subtle warning signs, the inconsistencies in the narrative, the nagging feeling that something is not quite right. He trusts his instincts, failing to realize that his instincts have been deliberately manipulated, his judgment clouded by carefully crafted illusions. The trap is not sprung with a sudden, violent action. It closes slowly, imperceptibly, like a tightening vice. Each concession, each compromise, each act of trust weakens the victim's position, making escape increasingly difficult. He becomes entangled in a web of obligations, promises, and dependencies, his freedom of action gradually curtailed. The manipulator exploits his weaknesses, his fears, his desires, turning them into weapons against him. He uses flattery to disarm him, guilt to control him, and threats to intimidate him. The victim, trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and rationalization, convinces himself that he has no other choice, that he must continue down the path he has chosen, even as it leads him to his ruin. He clings to the hope that things will improve, that the manipulator will eventually show mercy, that the promised rewards will materialize. But hope is a dangerous emotion in the hands of a deceiver. It is a tool to prolong the deception, to extract more value before the final reckoning. The moment of truth, when it arrives, is often swift and brutal. The manipulator discards the pretense of friendship or partnership, revealing his true nature. The victim is stripped of his illusions, his resources, his dignity. He is left with nothing but the bitter realization that he has been played, that he has allowed himself to be deceived. The failure lies not only in the manipulator's skill, but also in the victim's own naivete, his inability to recognize the inherent danger in placing his trust in someone who has not earned it. He failed to question the motives, to analyze the risks, to protect himself from exploitation. He allowed himself to be seduced by the promise of easy gains, ignoring the fundamental truth that there is no such thing as a free lunch. The trap is designed to exploit this weakness, this desire for something for nothing. The weak fall for it because they believe they are smarter than everyone else, that they can outwit the manipulator, that they can take advantage of the situation without paying the price. But in the game of deception, the only way to win is not to play. The wise man avoids the trap altogether, recognizing that the potential rewards are never worth the risk of being ensnared. He cultivates a healthy skepticism, questioning everything, trusting no one blindly. He protects himself with knowledge, with awareness, with a clear understanding of the dark forces that drive human behavior. He knows that deception is a constant threat, a weapon wielded by those who seek to exploit the vulnerable, and he resolves to never be among them. The Machiavellian approach to deception is not merely about telling lies. It is a calculated strategy, a systematic dismantling of trust and perception, orchestrated with cold precision. It requires a deep understanding of human nature, its weaknesses, its desires, and its fears. The manipulator acts as a puppeteer, pulling the strings of emotion and belief, guiding his target towards a preordained outcome. He doesn't simply present a false narrative. He constructs an entire reality, a carefully crafted illusion designed to ensnare the victim's mind. This involves not only the fabrication of information, but also the manipulation of context, the subtle shaping of events, the selective presentation of evidence, all aimed at creating a desired perception. The manipulator understands that people are more likely to believe what they want to believe, and he exploits this tendency by feeding them information that confirms their existing biases and desires. He presents himself as an ally, a friend, a confidant, someone who shares their values and understands their aspirations. He builds rapport by mirroring their behavior, echoing their sentiments, and offering support and encouragement. He gains their trust by demonstrating vulnerability, sharing personal details, and confiding in them with apparent sincerity. This creates a bond of reciprocity, a sense of obligation that makes the victim more susceptible to manipulation. The Machiavellian deceiver is a master of disguise, adapting his persona to suit the needs of the situation. He can be charming and charismatic, or cold and calculating, depending on what best serves his purpose. He is adept at reading people, identifying their weaknesses and exploiting their vulnerabilities. He understands that everyone has a price, whether it be money, power, recognition, or simply the desire to be liked. He offers his victims whatever they crave, dangling the carrot of temptation just out of reach, luring them deeper into his web of deceit. He uses flattery and praise to inflate their egos, making them feel important and valued. He appeals to their vanity, exploiting their desire to be admired and respected. He creates a sense of urgency, pressuring them to make quick decisions without fully considering the consequences. He plays on their emotions, using fear, guilt, and pity to manipulate their actions. He isolates them from their friends and family, cutting them off from sources of support and guidance. He creates a climate of confusion and uncertainty, making it difficult for them to distinguish between truth and falsehood. Throughout this process, the Machiavellian manipulator maintains a facade of innocence and sincerity. He denies any wrongdoing, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. He blames others for his actions, shifting responsibility and deflecting criticism. He portrays himself as a victim, eliciting sympathy and support. He is a master of gaslighting, making his victims question their own sanity and perception. He twists their words, distorts their memories, and denies their experiences, leaving them feeling confused, disoriented, and emotionally drained. He systematically undermines their confidence and self-esteem, making them more dependent on him for validation and support. The ultimate goal of the Machiavellian deceiver is not simply to gain a temporary advantage, but to establish long-term control. He wants to dominate his victims, to exploit them for his own personal gain, to mold them into instruments of his will. He seeks to create a relationship of dependency, where the victim is unable to function without his guidance and support. He achieves this by systematically eroding their autonomy, their independence, and their ability to think for themselves. He replaces their own values and beliefs with his own, shaping them into loyal followers who will blindly obey his commands. This is not a game of chance. It is a calculated, strategic assault on the human psyche, a ruthless exercise in power and control. The Machiavellian deceiver operates with a clear understanding of the principles of psychology and the dynamics of human relationships. He is a student of human nature, constantly observing and analyzing the behavior of those around him. He learns to identify their weaknesses, to anticipate their reactions, and to exploit their vulnerabilities. He is a master of manipulation, a skilled practitioner of the art of deception, and he will stop at nothing to achieve his goals. He views morality as a weakness, a constraint that limits his ability to achieve his objectives. He is willing to lie, cheat, and steal to get what he wants, and he feels no remorse for the harm he inflicts on others. He sees people as objects to be used and discarded, instruments to be manipulated for his own personal gain. He is a predator, lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. The Machiavellian approach is characterized by a complete lack of empathy and a profound disregard for the well-being of others. It is a cold, calculating, and ruthless strategy designed to exploit the weaknesses of human nature for personal gain. To defend against it requires a keen awareness of its tactics and a steadfast commitment to one's own values and principles. It demands a critical eye, a questioning mind, and an unwavering resolve to resist manipulation. The alternative is to become a pawn in someone else's game, a victim of their deceit, and a casualty of their ambition. History is replete with examples of deception employed as a strategic instrument on a grand scale. Consider the Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage. The Carthaginian general, Hannibal, a master strategist, repeatedly used deception to outmaneuver the numerically superior Roman legions. His feigned retreats lured the Romans into ambushes. His disinformation campaigns sowed discord among their ranks, and his surprise attacks exploited their overconfidence. He understood that victory was not solely determined by brute force, but also by the ability to manipulate the enemy's perception of reality. Hannibal's success stemmed from his deep understanding of Roman psychology. He knew their strengths, their weaknesses, and their vulnerabilities. He exploited their rigid adherence to tradition, their tendency to underestimate their enemies, and their susceptibility to fear and doubt. He crafted his deceptions to specifically target these vulnerabilities, creating confusion and uncertainty within the Roman ranks. The Battle of Cannae stands as a testament to Hannibal's mastery of deception. He deliberately weakened his center, tempting the Romans to push forward in a seemingly decisive attack. As the Roman legions advanced, Hannibal enveloped them from the flanks, creating a killing field from which few escaped. The scale of the Roman defeat was unprecedented, and it shook the foundations of the Republic. Hannibal's deception was not merely a tactical maneuver. It was a calculated psychological assault designed to demoralize the enemy and break their will to fight. Similarly, in the Peloponnesian War, the Athenians employed deception to maintain their naval dominance over the Spartans. They spread false rumors, launched diversionary attacks, and used elaborate signals to mislead the enemy fleet. Athenian commanders understood that controlling the flow of information was crucial to achieving their strategic objectives. They manipulated the Spartans' perceptions of Athenian strength, creating a climate of fear and uncertainty that deterred them from challenging Athenian control of the seas. The Athenians also understood the importance of maintaining a facade of strength. They invested heavily in their navy, constructing impressive warships and training skilled crews. This display of power served as a deterrent to potential enemies, discouraging them from attacking Athens. However, the Athenians' reliance on deception ultimately proved to be their undoing. Their arrogance and their willingness to exploit others alienated their allies and created resentment among their subjects. The Spartans, though initially outmaneuvered, eventually learned to adapt to Athenian tactics and exploit their weaknesses. The Peloponnesian War ended in Athenian defeat, a testament to the limitations of deception as a long-term strategy. These historical parallels illustrate the enduring power of deception as a strategic instrument. From the battlefield to the boardroom, deception can be used to gain an advantage over rivals, to manipulate public opinion, and to achieve strategic objectives. However, deception is not without its risks. It can erode trust, damage reputations, and ultimately lead to self-destruction. The Machiavellian deceiver must be aware of these risks and weigh them carefully against the potential benefits. He must understand that deception is a double-edged sword, capable of cutting both ways. A successful deception requires careful planning, meticulous execution, and a deep understanding of human psychology. It requires the ability to anticipate the enemy's reactions, to exploit their weaknesses, and to maintain a credible facade. It also requires a willingness to take risks and to adapt to changing circumstances. The Machiavellian deceiver is a master of improvisation, able to think on his feet and to adjust his plans as needed. He is also a skilled communicator, able to persuade others to believe his lies and to follow his lead. He uses language as a weapon, carefully crafting his words to manipulate emotions and to control perceptions. He understands the power of rhetoric and the importance of framing his message in a way that resonates with his audience. The study of historical conflicts provides valuable insights into the strategies and tactics of deception. By examining the successes and failures of past deceivers, we can learn to identify and defend against manipulation in our own lives. We can also gain a deeper understanding of the human psyche and the vulnerabilities that make us susceptible to deception. Knowledge is the most potent weapon against deception. The more we understand how deception works, the better equipped we are to resist its influence. We must cultivate a critical eye, a questioning mind, and an unwavering commitment to truth. We must be willing to challenge conventional wisdom, to scrutinize authority, and to demand evidence for all claims. Only by remaining vigilant and skeptical can we protect ourselves from the insidious effects of deception. The ability to discern truth from falsehood is essential for navigating the complexities of the modern world. In an age of misinformation and propaganda, it is more important than ever to be able to think critically and to evaluate information objectively. The Machiavellian deceiver thrives in an environment of ignorance and apathy. He exploits the vulnerabilities of those who are too trusting, too naive, or too easily swayed by emotions. By educating ourselves and others about the tactics of deception, we can create a more resistant and resilient society. We can empower individuals to make informed decisions and to resist manipulation. The ultimate goal is not to eliminate deception altogether, as that is likely impossible. Rather, it is to minimize its impact and to create a world where truth and transparency are valued above all else. This requires a collective effort, involving individuals, institutions, and governments. It requires a commitment to ethical conduct, a respect for human dignity, and a willingness to hold deceivers accountable for their actions. Deception is a virus that attacks the mind's natural defenses. It preys on our cognitive biases, the mental shortcuts and assumptions that allow us to navigate the world efficiently, but which also make us vulnerable to manipulation. One of the most common of these biases is the confirmation bias, our tendency to seek out and interpret information that confirms our existing beliefs, while ignoring or dismissing evidence that contradicts them. The deceiver exploits this bias by crafting narratives that resonate with our pre-existing worldview, feeding us information that we want to believe, even if it is false. Another potent weapon in the deceiver's arsenal is the appeal to emotion. By stirring up feelings of fear, anger, or hope, the deceiver can bypass our rational faculties and lead us to make decisions that we would otherwise regret. This is particularly effective in times of crisis, when people are more likely to be anxious and uncertain, and therefore more susceptible to emotional appeals. Consider the demagogue who exploits popular discontent by scapegoating minorities or promising unrealistic solutions. His power lies not in the truth of his claims, but in their ability to evoke strong emotions in his audience. The deceiver also understands the power of social proof, the tendency to conform to the beliefs and behaviors of those around us. By creating the impression that a particular idea or course of action is widely accepted, the deceiver can pressure individuals to go along with it, even if they have doubts or reservations. This is often achieved through propaganda, which aims to shape public opinion by selectively presenting information and suppressing dissenting voices. Think of the advertising campaign that portrays a product as being popular and desirable, even if it is of poor quality. The goal is not to provide objective information, but to create a perception of social acceptance that will drive sales. Furthermore, the deceiver utilizes the principle of authority, our tendency to obey figures of authority, even when their commands are unethical or harmful. This is rooted in our social conditioning, which teaches us to respect and defer to those in positions of power. The deceiver capitalizes on this by presenting themselves as an expert, a leader, or a representative of a legitimate institution, thereby gaining our trust and compliance. A classic example is the con artist who poses as a government official or a medical professional, using their perceived authority to swindle unsuspecting victims. Memory itself becomes a battleground in the theater of deception. Our memories are not perfect recordings of past events, but rather reconstructions that are subject to distortion and manipulation. The deceiver understands this and seeks to influence our memories by planting false information or subtly altering the way events are portrayed. This is particularly insidious because it can lead us to doubt our own experiences and perceptions, making us even more vulnerable to manipulation. The subtle art of gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation that involves systematically denying or distorting a victim's reality, relies heavily on this principle. The goal is to make the victim question their sanity and lose their sense of self-worth, thereby making them completely dependent on the deceiver. The human mind is wired for connection and empathy, but these qualities can also be exploited by the deceiver. We are naturally inclined to trust and cooperate with others, especially those who appear to be similar to us. The deceiver uses this to their advantage by feigning empathy, mirroring our emotions, and building rapport. This allows them to gain our trust and lower our defenses, making us more susceptible to their influence. The skilled negotiator, for instance, may use techniques of active listening and emotional validation to build a connection with their counterpart, even while pursuing their own self-interest. The Machiavellian mind sees trust not as a virtue, but as a tool, a means to an end. He understands that people are more likely to be deceived by those they trust, and he exploits this vulnerability without remorse. He studies human nature with a cold, detached eye, identifying the weaknesses and vulnerabilities that can be exploited for personal gain. He is a master of disguise, able to adapt his persona to suit the needs of the situation, presenting himself as a friend, an ally, or even a victim, depending on what will be most effective. He is patient, calculating, and ruthless, willing to play the long game, knowing that the rewards for successful deception can be immense. He recognizes the inherent paradox of deception, that it is most effective when it is least detectable. The most skillful deceivers are those who can convince us that they are being completely honest, even when they are lying through their teeth. They understand that the key to successful deception is not simply to tell lies, but to control the narrative, to shape the perception of reality itself. This requires a deep understanding of psychology, a keen awareness of social dynamics, and an unwavering commitment to their own goals. To truly defend against deception, we must understand that the deceiver's ultimate weapon is not the lie itself, but the manipulation of our own minds. Consider the case of the celebrated art restorer, a figure steeped in the aesthetic grandeur of centuries past. He moves through hushed galleries, a reverent silence clinging to his tailored suit as he examines masterpieces under the soft glow of concealed lighting. His pronouncements are delivered with an air of unimpeachable authority, built upon decades of supposed expertise and a cultivated persona of selfless dedication to preserving cultural heritage. He speaks of the delicate dance between conservation and restoration, the ethical tightrope walked in bringing faded glories back to life. He cultivates relationships with wealthy collectors, museum curators, and influential patrons, each encounter a carefully orchestrated performance designed to instill absolute confidence in his abilities and, crucially, his integrity. He is welcomed into their homes, their vaults, their inner circles, entrusted with priceless works of art, family heirlooms representing generations of history and tradition. This trust, however, is the carefully constructed foundation of an elaborate scheme. Under the guise of restoration, he subtly alters the paintings, introducing minute details, changing brushstrokes, manipulating the pigments to bring them closer to a predetermined aesthetic, one that aligns with the preferences of his most lucrative clients. He might subtly enhance the vibrancy of a landscape, sharpen the features of a portrait, or even add entirely new elements, all imperceptible to the untrained eye, but dramatically increasing the perceived value of the artwork in a specific segment of the market. He understands the psychology of collecting, the powerful allure of exclusivity, and the willingness of the wealthy to pay exorbitant sums for pieces that confirm their refined taste and solidify their social standing. He exploits this vanity with surgical precision, tailoring his alterations to appeal to specific collectors, creating artificial provenance and manipulating art market trends. The alterations are so subtle, so meticulously executed, that they are virtually undetectable. Even the most sophisticated scientific analysis often fails to reveal the deception, as he uses authentic materials and techniques, carefully aging the new additions to blend seamlessly with the original artwork. He creates a network of complicit experts, offering generous commissions and favors in exchange for their silence, or, even better, their unwitting endorsement of his restored masterpieces. These experts, often driven by their own ambition or blinded by the restorer's charisma, unwittingly become pawns in his scheme, lending their credibility to his fraudulent claims. The restorer's success hinges not only on his technical skill, but also on his ability to manage perceptions, to control the flow of information, and to manipulate the egos of those around him. He cultivates an image of unimpeachable integrity, presenting himself as a selfless servant of art, dedicated to preserving the legacy of the masters. This carefully constructed facade allows him to operate with impunity, shielding him from suspicion and enabling him to continue his deception for years, enriching himself at the expense of unsuspecting collectors and undermining the integrity of the art world itself. The deeper deception lies in his ability to convince others that his motives are purely altruistic. He speaks passionately about the importance of preserving art for future generations, masking his own avarice behind a veneer of cultural reverence. This allows him to deflect scrutiny and maintain the trust of his clients, even when confronted with evidence of his wrongdoing. The art restorer's scheme illustrates a key principle of deception. The most effective lies are those that are intertwined with elements of truth. He uses his genuine knowledge of art history and restoration techniques to conceal his fraudulent activities, making it difficult for others to distinguish between his legitimate work and his deceptive practices. He understands that people are more likely to believe a lie if it is presented in a context of honesty and expertise. His meticulous approach is not simply about financial gain. It is also about the exercise of power. He derives satisfaction from manipulating others, from knowing that he can control their perceptions and influence their decisions. He sees himself as a master manipulator, orchestrating events from behind the scenes and reveling in his ability to deceive even the most discerning art connoisseurs. The vulnerability lies not in the artwork itself, but in the human desire for authenticity, for connection to the past, and for the validation of personal taste. The art restorer preys on these desires, offering his clients a false sense of security and expertise, while secretly manipulating the very objects they cherish. This scenario demonstrates that deception is not always about blatant lies. It is often about subtle manipulation, carefully crafted illusions, and the exploitation of human vulnerabilities. The truly dangerous deceiver is not the one who tells obvious falsehoods, but the one who can convince you to believe a carefully constructed reality that serves his own ends. He understands that the most effective form of deception is not to simply tell lies, but to control the narrative, to shape the perception of reality itself. Deception, at its core, is an act of engineering, meticulously designed to exploit vulnerabilities within the human psyche. It is not merely the utterance of a falsehood, but a carefully constructed edifice of illusion, built upon a foundation of perceived truth. The master deceiver understands that the most effective lies are those that resonate with pre-existing beliefs, desires, and fears. He doesn't simply create something from nothing. He reshapes what already exists, subtly twisting perceptions to align with his own agenda. This requires a keen understanding of human nature an ability to anticipate reactions and manipulate emotions. He studies his target, identifying their weaknesses, their biases, and their blind spots. He then crafts his deception to exploit these vulnerabilities, presenting a carefully curated reality that confirms their preconceived notions and reinforces their existing beliefs. The truly skilled deceiver understands that the key to success lies not in the boldness of the lie, but in its seamless integration into the existing fabric of reality. He weaves his deception into the narrative of everyday life, making it so subtle that it becomes almost invisible. He understands that people are more likely to accept something as truth if it is presented in a familiar context, by a trusted source, or with a sense of authority. He therefore cultivates these attributes, carefully constructing his persona to project an image of trustworthiness, competence, and sincerity. He understands that deception is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process of manipulation. He constantly monitors his target's reactions, adjusting his strategy as needed to maintain control of the narrative. He anticipates potential challenges and prepares countermeasures to neutralize any threats to his carefully constructed illusion. This requires a level of vigilance and attention to detail that borders on obsession. The deceiver must be constantly aware of his surroundings, monitoring the flow of information, and anticipating the actions of others. He must be able to think on his feet, adapting his strategy in real time to respond to unexpected events. He must also be able to maintain his composure under pressure, concealing his true intentions behind a mask of calm detachment. Deception is not simply about misleading others. It is also about controlling oneself. The deceiver must be able to suppress his own emotions, maintain a consistent facade, and resist the temptation to reveal his true nature. This requires a high degree of self-discipline and emotional intelligence. He must be able to understand and manipulate his own emotions, as well as the emotions of others. He must be able to project an image of confidence and authority, even when he is feeling vulnerable or insecure. He must also be able to detect deception in others, identifying those who might pose a threat to his carefully constructed illusion. Deception is a constant battle of wits, a game of cat and mouse in which the stakes are high and the consequences can be devastating. The master deceiver understands that the only way to win this game is to be constantly vigilant, to anticipate every move, and to never underestimate the power of human vulnerability. The environment in which deception thrives is often one of ambiguity and uncertainty. When the truth is difficult to discern, people are more likely to rely on their instincts, their emotions, and their preconceived notions. The deceiver exploits this ambiguity, creating a fog of confusion that obscures the truth and makes it easier to manipulate perceptions. He understands that people are more likely to believe what they want to believe, and he tailors his deception to appeal to their deepest desires and fears. He presents a compelling narrative that confirms their existing biases and reinforces their preconceived notions. He uses emotional appeals to bypass their rational judgment, manipulating their feelings to cloud their thinking. He understands that people are more likely to be persuaded by emotion than by logic, and he uses this knowledge to his advantage. He crafts his deception to evoke strong emotional responses, such as fear, anger, or desire. He uses these emotions to distract his target from the facts, to cloud their judgment, and to make them more susceptible to his influence. The use of flattery, or the appearance of vulnerability, can be powerful tools in the arsenal of the deceiver. People are often more willing to trust those who appear to be humble or self-deprecating. The deceiver can use this to his advantage by feigning vulnerability, creating the impression that he is in need of assistance or support. This can disarm his target, making them more likely to let their guard down and reveal valuable information. He can also use flattery to inflate his target's ego, making them feel more confident and secure. This can make them more susceptible to his influence, as they are less likely to question his motives or challenge his authority. The deceiver understands that the human ego is a fragile thing, and he is skilled at manipulating it to his own advantage. He uses flattery to stroke his target's ego, making them feel important and valued. He also uses criticism to deflate their ego, making them feel insecure and inadequate. By manipulating their ego, he can control their behavior and influence their decisions. The social context also plays a significant role in the success of deception. People are more likely to believe something if it is presented by someone they perceive to be an authority figure, or if it is supported by a group of their peers. The deceiver can exploit this by aligning himself with influential individuals or groups, creating the impression that his deception is widely accepted and supported. He can also use social pressure to silence dissent, making it difficult for others to challenge his narrative. He understands that people are social creatures, and they are strongly influenced by the opinions of others. He uses this to his advantage by creating a social environment that supports his deception, making it difficult for others to resist his influence. Ultimately, deception is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that requires a deep understanding of human psychology, social dynamics, and the art of manipulation. The master deceiver is not simply a liar. He is a skilled strategist, a master manipulator, and a keen observer of human nature. He understands that deception is a powerful tool, and he uses it with precision